I've developed my own power rankings algorithm that is based 100% off of 2020 statistics and includes zero bias. Here are my power rankings heading into week 13 of the 2020 NFL season. Just to give you guys a quick rundown of my spreadsheet once again, the first column is what teams were ranked last week, so you can see where it's green, they've gone up, where it's red, they've gone down, what teams are currently ranked. In this column, I've got the teams named, 2 asterisks where teams are currently division leaders, and single asterisks where teams are currently in the wild card. Then in this column, you can see how many spots they rose up or fell down. Then you can see ESPN's power rankings, NFL's power rankings, my personal power rankings, my plus minus compared to ESPN's power rankings, and my plus minus compared to NFL's power rankings. So we'll start, as we do, at the bottom with the New York Jets, who just got blown out by the Miami Dolphins. Jets were actually looking pretty decent for the 2 weeks going into that game, but they got blown out 20-3. It was no surprise, really. Jacksonville still at 31. Those are still, without a doubt, the bottom 2 teams. They've been like that for months now, it seems like. I've got Dallas at 30. Both ESPN and NFL have Cincinnati at 30, so I'm a little bit higher on Cincinnati, 1 spot higher. I have them at 29, and I'm a little bit lower on Dallas. I don't understand how Dallas is all the way up at 26 in NFL's rankings. They have like Chicago at 28. Anyways, I've got Cincinnati at 29. Like I said, they're still in the same position that they were last week. My bottom 4 have remained the same. Then I've got the LA Chargers at 28, and they went down 3 spots this week after losing to the Bills, where they just totally mismanaged the end of the game. Anthony Lynn and the Chargers did. I mean, they weren't going to win the game anyways, but God, that was really tough to watch. I'm 4 spots lower than ESPN on the Chargers, and I'm 9 spots lower than the NFL on the Chargers, which makes them the team that I'm actually the lowest on compared to the ESPN and NFL power rankings. So for the record, I definitely personally agree more with ESPN and NFL's power rankings of the Chargers than with my own algorithmic power rankings of the Chargers. I think certainly the Chargers are a better football team than the Lions, the Eagles, the Broncos, and the Giants. But that's why these stat-based power rankings are interesting. Because when you think about the Chargers, you think about Justin Herbert just launching a missile to Keenan Allen in the back of the end zone. But in reality, if you go back and look at the Chargers game logs, they have performed very poorly as a team this season. Over the Chargers' last 5 games, they're 1-4, with their lone victory being over the pitiful New York Jets. And that win was a narrow 6-point victory, 34-28. The only other victory in the Justin Herbert Chargers era is against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Literally, the 2 worst teams in the NFL are the only 2 teams that Justin Herbert has defeated this season. And the Chargers defense gives up the 8th most points per game in the NFL. The Chargers' remaining schedule is against the Patriots, the Falcons, the Raiders, the Broncos, and the Chiefs. It would be really nice to see the Chargers get on the winning end of some close games to finish out the season. Then at 27, I've got the Detroit Lions. Somehow they went up 1 spot in my rankings this week, even though they got absolutely embarrassed on Thanksgiving by the Texans. I'm even with the ESPN on my power rankings of the Lions, and I'm 2 spots higher than NFL. I probably agree with the NFL. Maybe the Lions got a bit of a bump because they fired Matt Patricia this week. Then I've got Washington at 26, somehow dropping 3 spots despite a dominant victory, albeit the victory was over Dallas, who I do not rank very highly. But the 3 teams that jumped ahead of Washington this week for Washington to drop down 3 spots were Philadelphia, which I personally don't agree with, even though my math says that. Houston, who I do agree with, and Atlanta, who I'll also agree with after they just dominated the Raiders. And the Raiders were a top 10 team in my power rankings last week. But as far as the Washington football team goes, I'm 2 spots higher than ESPN, and I'm 1 spot lower than NFL on ranking them. Then I've got Carolina at 25. They're down 7 spots after losing a nail-biter to the Minnesota Vikings this past week. I am 5 spots lower than ESPN on the Panthers, and I'm 3 spots lower than the NFL on the Panthers, and the Panthers were the biggest faller in my power rankings this week. Now, the same thing that I just did with Washington, they dropped 3 spots, and I focused on the 3 teams that rose ahead of them. I want to do the same thing with the Panthers, because sometimes falling in the power rankings is more of a product of worse teams ascending past you than you really falling down in the rankings. So the 7 teams that jumped ahead of the Panthers were the Eagles, the Broncos, the Giants, the Texans, the Falcons, the Patriots, and the 49ers. There's certainly an argument to rank the Panthers ahead of the Giants, the Broncos, and the Eagles in particular, but the fact is that the Panthers have been a lot like the Chargers this season in the fact that they just don't win close games. Obviously, the Panthers had the 20-0 blowout over the Lions, but that was with their backup quarterback playing, and it was against the Lions. In the Panthers' last 7 games, they're 1-6, with their lone victory being the aforementioned win over the Lions. 5 out of 6 of those losses were 1-score losses, and 6 out of 8 of the Panthers' losses on this season have been 1-score losses. The Panthers are just a team that you love to bet on to cover the spread, but you never want to bet on when they're the favorites. Then I've got Philadelphia at 24. They're up 2 spots, even though they lost this past week, although it was a 1-score loss to the Seahawks. And in reality, the Eagles have played a lot of good teams like the Seahawks and the Ravens very close. I don't think they're a very good team, but they're 24th in my power rankings, 1 spot lower than ESPN, 3 spots higher than the NFL. I probably side a little bit more with the NFL's power rankings of the Eagles, but that's the NFC East for you, you know? I've got Denver at 23, down 1 spot after the Kendall Hinton disaster. I mean, we should be calling it the Hintonburg or something, I don't know. But it's not on him, obviously. He's a practice squad wide receiver playing quarterback. I'm not knocking him. I've got Denver ranked 1 spot lower than ESPN. I've got them ranked even with the NFL. Then I've got the New York Giants. You can see the 2 stars there denoting them as the divisional leader in my power rankings, all the way down at 22. And if the season ended right now, they would have a home playoff game. So I've got the Giants. They're down 3 spots and they're still number 1 in my power rankings. And I do expect Washington to take over this division, especially if Colt McCoy is going to be around for the Giants for more than 1 week here. I do expect Washington to take over the division regardless, though. At this point, they're definitely playing the best football in the NFC East. Anyways, I've got the Giants 4 spots higher than ESPN, and I'm 2 spots higher than the NFL. I'd probably side with those guys a little bit more. They're probably factoring in Colt McCoy, whereas my power rankings are based off of statistics, so the statistics aren't really projecting for the future to the new quarterback. It's really only taking into account the past. So that is an issue with my power rankings, so take that for what it's worth. I've got Houston at 21. They went up 6 spots after absolutely dominating the Lions on Thanksgiving. The Texans are looking really good right now. It's unfortunate that they had, Will Fuller, he's gone for the year now with the PED suspension. I think they lost Bradley Roby as well, so that's not great. I'm 4 spots higher than ESPN on my ranking of Houston, and I'm dead even with the NFL. I think Houston's a pretty good football team. I might even rank them a little bit higher in my head because I've got Chicago at 20, and I would take Houston to beat Chicago right now if you ask me, like without a doubt, in Houston or in Chicago. Chicago down 3 spots in my power rankings after losing to the Packers. They actually had a decent showing. I think Mitch Trubisky and the Bears are better than Nick Foles and the Bears, that's for sure. I'm 1 spot lower than ESPN, and once again, I'm 8 spots higher than the NFL. I don't know how you put the Bears all the way down at 28, lower than Philadelphia, lower than Dallas, Washington, the Giants, Denver. I don't know how you rank Chicago that low. That's egregious in my opinion. We've got Minnesota at 19, down 3 spots, even though they had a narrow victory this past week over the Panthers. You have to respect that the Falcons, the Patriots, and the 49ers all had massive wins. The Falcons beat the Raiders handily, and the Raiders were a top 10 team. New England beat Arizona, who is a playoff team, and San Francisco beat the Rams, divisional rival, who's also a playoff team. So the fact that Minnesota went down once again is a product of really these other 3 teams just having really quality weeks this past week. As far as Minnesota's ranked, I'm 1 lower than ESPN, and I'm 3 lower than the NFL on them. And then I've got Atlanta at 18. They went up 6 spots. They were almost my biggest riser of the week. The Falcons are going to have their work cut out for them as they take on the Saints this week, who are red hot. I'm looking forward to that one. I think the Falcons are going to be able to make it a competitive divisional game with how well they've been playing recently. But I don't know. At the same time, the Saints might blow them out. That's actually a game I'm really looking forward to watching. I'm 3 spots higher than Atlanta, than the ESPN rankings, and I'm dead even with the NFL rankings on the Falcons. Then at 17, I've got the Patriots up 4 spots after a really strong win over a quality Cardinals team. Now, albeit the Cardinals with Kyler Murray having the shoulder problem, they didn't look like the Cardinals have looked so far this year. Murray had by far his worst game of the season, so I'm not sure exactly how much stock to put into that New England win. I'm really looking forward to the Patriots playing the Chargers this week. I think that's going to be a great measuring stick to see the Chargers can actually get over the hump and finally beat, a halfway decent team. And then I think it's also, an opportunity for New England to show that, hey, we can beat these lower ranked teams consistently. We're actually, a decent team ourselves here. And the Patriots are one of just 4 teams that myself, ESPN, and the NFL all agree on the power ranking for. Then at 16, I've got San Francisco, who is going up 4 spots this week after an enormous divisional win over the Rams. I'm even with ESPN's rankings on San Francisco, and I'm 3 spots higher than the NFL. Then at 15, down 2 spots after losing to the Patriots, currently in a wild card position, I have the Arizona Cardinals. I'm 2 spots lower than ESPN on the Cardinals, 1 spot lower than NFL on the Cardinals, and I'm concerned right now with the Cardinals. I'm concerned with Kyler Murray's shoulder, and I'm concerned that they're not going to be able to finish strong on this season. Hopefully they can prove me wrong because they're a really fun team to watch, but that's something to keep your eye on. The Cardinals really didn't perform very well this past week, so keep your eye on them going forward to see if that was just a 1-week blip or if they really are on a downward trajectory. And still at 14 is the Ravens. That seems accurate to me. The Ravens didn't deserve to go down after losing fairly narrowly to Pittsburgh, who's supposed to be the best team in the entire league. And the Ravens were playing massively handicapped in that game. I'm 3 spots lower than ESPN on the Ravens. I'm 2 spots lower than the NFL on the Ravens. And, I still think the Ravens have a really good chance to make the playoffs this season. I've got Las Vegas at 13, down 3 spots. That was probably the most embarrassing loss of the NFL season so far. I'm not even a Raiders fan, and I still have a bad taste in my mouth from that loss. That was just terrible. I don't know if you guys play fantasy football at all, but I was all over the Raiders and daily fantasy and stuff, and I'm still salty about how bad the Raiders played this last week, so I really hope that the Dolphins can beat the Raiders down the line in the regular season here and make the playoffs ourselves, and at the same time get a little revenge on the Raiders for burning me last week in daily fantasy. Then at 12, I've got the LA Rams. They went down 6 spots after losing to the 49ers this week, and that was a really bad loss. Luckily, the Rams are still in a wild card position, and they're taking on a divisional rival this week in the Cardinals. With Kyler Murray having the aforementioned shoulder issues, I think that really favors the Rams. So hopefully they can get back on track this week. I believe they will. I'm 2 spots lower on the Rams than ESPN, and I'm 4 spots lower than the NFL. I think if the Rams win this week, I will be more in line with those ESPN and NFL rankings. Then at 11, up 4 spots, I've got the Brownies. They're playing great football right now. Nick Chubb just can't be denied. I'm 1 spot higher than ESPN on the Browns. I'm 2 spots higher than the NFL on the Browns. At 10, I've got Tampa Bay. They went down 5 spots in my power rankings after getting dusted by the Chiefs this past week. If you look at the score of that game, the score shows a lot closer than the game really was. The Chiefs dominated that game handily from the get-go. I'm 2 spots lower than ESPN on ranking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm 1 spot lower than the NFL. And I'll be honest, I just don't think that they have a good offensive scheme. I don't think that they're willing to adapt to Tom Brady's skill set, and I don't think they're going to be able to beat any good teams or make any kind of a real playoff run. And at 9, down 5 spots after losing very, very badly to divisional rival Tennessee Titans, I've got the Indianapolis Colts. I'm even with ESPN on the Colts. I'm 1 spot higher than the NFL on the Colts, and that loss was a dagger. I know there's 5 weeks left in the season, but that was really a must-win game for the Colts to control the division and really feel like they're in the driver's seat and in a good position to make the playoffs. Now, I'm certainly not favoring them to be able to win the division, and I wouldn't be surprised if they outright missed the playoffs this season. Then at 8, I've got Green Bay down 1 spot despite winning this past week against the Bears. I didn't think it was that impressive of a victory, though. The Bears are basically a team that's dead in the water, and they kind of made it a little bit competitive against the Packers. I'm 4 spots lower than the Packers compared to ESPN and NFL, who both have them all the way up at 4. Once again, I'm not sure if the Packers are a Super Bowl team. I'm getting a little bit more convinced week by week, but the Packers' inability to stop the run is still apparent. David Montgomery, who is just a washed football player basically already, had like a 57-yard run straight down the middle on the Packers. It's like, man, if that's Derrick Henry or any running back with some real juice, it's going to be ugly for the Packers. Then at 7, I've got the Miami Dolphins. They went up 1 spot in my power rankings after just dominating the Jets this past week. And I'm 7 spots higher than ESPN. I'm 8 spots higher than the NFL. And obviously, it's the team that I'm highest on compared to the ESPN and NFL power rankings. Week in and week out, the Dolphins pop up way too high in my power rankings. And I know it must seem like I'm just putting them up there because I'm a Dolphins fan, but the fact is the Dolphins are statistically dominant in a lot of facets that pertain to my algorithm. For example, the 7-4 Dolphins have the 4th best point differential in the NFL behind only the 11-0 Steelers, the 10-1 Chiefs, and the 9-2 Saints. The Dolphins have outright won 4 games this season as underdogs and are 8-3 against the spread. The only team that's better than the Dolphins against the spread is the Steelers. This season, the Dolphins have played the Bills, the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals. In those 4 games, the Dolphins are 2-2, losing to the Bills and the Seahawks in 1-score games, dominating the Rams, and narrowly beating the Cardinals in a close game. I bring up those 4 games because all 4 of those teams are playoff teams, and the Dolphins were able to hang with all of them. Going 2-2 against those 4 teams shows that the Dolphins can hang with some of the top tier teams in the NFL. The Dolphins also have the 2nd best scoring defense in the NFL, surrendering just 18.6 points per game. Now, it helps that the Dolphins have played the Jets twice, and in those 2 games, the Jets have scored a combined 3 points. But if you look at the Jets' recent box scores, 3 weeks ago, they actually played the Patriots very tight, losing narrowly 30-27. And then 2 weeks ago, they lost very narrowly to the Chargers, 34-28. So for what it's worth, the Jets were actually on a bit of an offensive hot streak going into this past week against the Dolphins, where they lost 20-3. I believe I said it last week, and I'll say it again this week. I am very intrigued to see how the Dolphins perform over their last 4 games of the season. Once again, those 4 games will be versus the Chiefs, versus the Patriots, at the Raiders, and at the Bills. Then I've got Seattle at 6. They went up 3 spots after beating the Eagles this past week, and that was another game that if you look at the box score, it looks like it was a close game, but in reality, Seattle dominated that game from start to finish, and the box score made it look a lot closer than the game really was. I'm even with ESPN on ranking Seattle, and I'm 1 spot lower than the NFL, so it seems like Seattle is finally starting to get to be considered a top team once again. Then at 5, I've got the Buffalo Bills, who tied with the Tennessee Titans as my biggest riser of the week, going up 7 spots after beating the Chargers really quite handily this past week. Made them look quite amateurish at the end of the game. Although that's not really Buffalo, that's Anthony Lynn just kind of choking situational football. I've got Buffalo even ranked with ESPN, and I'm 2 spots higher than the NFL on the Bills. And of course, I've got the Titans up 7 spots, as I had just mentioned. At 4 this week. I'm 3 spots higher than ESPN on the Titans. I'm 2 spots higher than the NFL on the Titans. And the Titans are my biggest riser this week after just crapping on their divisional rival Colts. Over their last 2 games, the Titans have looked dominant, and it appears that they're heading into the final quarter of their season playing their best football of the year. On this season, the Titans have played 3 teams that are currently in the AFC playoff race. One was a 42-16 win over the Bills. One was a 3-point loss to the Steelers, where the Titans kicker missed an easy field goal at the end of the game that would have sent the game into overtime. And then last week, the Titans were able to avenge their loss to the Colts 45-26. I honestly think the Titans might run the table for the rest of the season, and that won't be an easy task. Listen to their schedule. They play the Browns, the Jaguars, the Lions, the Packers, and the Texans. The Browns, the Packers, and the Texans in particular have a real chance to beat the Titans. But as of right now, I think I'll be favoring the Titans against all 5 of those teams. Meanwhile, the Colts, who are now a game behind the Titans, play the Texans, the Raiders, the Texans again, the Steelers, and the Jaguars. To me, it seems likely that the Colts will lose 2 of those 5 games, so I'm certainly favoring the Titans to win the AFC South at this point. The Titans' defense is not very good, but their run game is so good that it acts as a form of defense in its own right. By that, I mean if the Titans can establish their run and get an early lead, then the other team will be more one-dimensional because they'll have to throw the football more in order to catch up. Once the opposing offense is more one-dimensional, then it's a lot easier to play defense. If you want to see an example of what I'm talking about, look back at last year's playoff game between the Titans and the Ravens, where Lamar Jackson had to throw the football 59 times. Obviously, the Ravens lost to the Titans in the playoffs. The Titans went on to the AFC Championship game that year. And I'm really looking forward to see if the Titans can mimic that Cinderella-like story in the playoffs this season. Then my top 3 teams for the 3rd consecutive week. It's the same top 3 teams that ESPN has had for the 3rd consecutive week, and the same teams in a slightly different order that NFL has had for the 3rd consecutive week. We've got the Saints at 3, who I think is personally the best team in the NFL. We've got Kansas City at 2, and we've got Pittsburgh at 1. So one other thing I wanted to note before we get out of here was that it's interesting how the playoff teams are really occupying all of the top spots in my power rankings. Look, the top 12 teams in my power rankings are all playoff teams, and then the other 2 playoff teams are ranked at 15, and then obviously the Giants at 22 because it's an NFC East situation. But almost consecutively, my top teams are all the playoff teams. So that's just an interesting little bit that tells me that my algorithm has to be at least somewhat accurate. So that's going to do it for my power ranking show this week 13 of the 2020 NFL season. Comment below with any thoughts you have on my video, and also follow me on Twitter at Empey Talks. I talk about mixed martial arts and NFL over there a lot, and subscribe to this channel. Click the bell to be notified when my next power rankings video comes up. Until next time, enjoy your football this weekend, everybody.